The galaxy had seen war before, countless times, in fact. Empires rose and fell like waves crashing against a jagged shore, leaving behind ruins and whispers of glory. The Kavren Dominion had crushed the insectoid swarms of the Zithar expanse. The Telleri Collective had outmaneuvered the crystalline fleets of the Vakshun. Everyone knew the rules. Power ruled, mercy was weakness, and survival was a game of cold calculation. But nothing had prepared them for the humans. It started with a ripple, a faint tremor in the void. The Dominion's long-range sensors picked it up first, a blip so massive it overloaded the arrays. The analysts scoffed at the readings. A glitch, they said. A ship that size couldn't exist. The laws of physics wouldn't allow it. But then the Telleri confirmed it, their psionic relays screaming with static as something tore through the fabric of hyperspace. The Vakshuan went silent, their crystalline minds fracturing under the weight of what they'd glimpsed. By the time the first visuals came through, the galaxy's mightiest powers were already trembling. The ship was a monster. A jagged, blackened behemoth, its hull scarred with the burns of 1,000 battles, its silhouette a brutal defiance of elegance. It didn't glide like the Telleri cutters, or shimmer like the Vakshuan prisms. It lumbered, a predator too big to care about stealth, too strong to bother with grace. The Dominion called it an abomination. The Telleri whispered of a god's wrath made manifest. But the humans? They called it retribution. Admiral Kyle Tor of the Kavren Dominion stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Claw staring at the holoscreen. His mandibles clicked in agitation, his 4 eyes narrowing as the human vessel filled the display. Around him, his officers chittered nervously, their claws tapping against consoles. The retribution hung there in the void, silent and unyielding, dwarfing the Dominion's entire battle group. Its weapons weren't even powered up, not yet, but the sheer presence of it was enough to make Kale Tor's blood run cold. "Open a channel," he barked, his voice steady despite the dread coiling in his gut. "Demand their intent." The comms officer hesitated, her claws trembling. "Sir, they're not responding to standard hails. They're broadcasting something else." "Put it through," Kale Tor snapped. The bridge fell silent as the human transmission crackled to life. It wasn't a voice. Not at first. It was a sound, low and guttural, like the rumble of a dying star. Then came the words, spoken in a tongue the Dominion's translators barely grasped. The voice was deep, raw, and laced with something Kale Tor couldn't name. Anger, yes, but also sorrow. A wound that refused to heal. "This is Admiral Elena Voss of the United Earth Coalition. You took our worlds. You burned our cities. You thought us broken. You were wrong." Kale Tor's mandibles froze mid-click. The humans. He'd heard of them. Everyone had. A primitive species from a backwater system, barely worth the effort of conquest. The Dominion had raided their colonies decades ago, glassing a few planets for resources and leaving the rest to rot. The Telleri had called it a mercy to let them fade into obscurity. The Vakshuan had dismissed them as insignificant. But this was no broken remnant. This was vengeance given form. "Scan it," Kale Tor ordered, his voice tight. "Find a weakness." The sensor officer's claws danced over the controls, but his report came back laced with panic. "Sir, its hull. It's layered with an alloy we can't identify. Energy signatures suggest weapons capable of cracking a planet. And there's something else. It's carrying smaller craft. Thousands of them." Kyle Tor stared at the screen, his mind racing. Thousands of fighters. No fleet in the galaxy could deploy that many. The Dominion's largest carriers topped out at a few hundred. The Retribution wasn't just a ship. It was a war machine, a floating fortress built to drown its enemies in blood. "Raise shields," he said, forcing calm into his tone. "Signal the fleet. Prepare for..." He didn't finish. The Retribution moved. Not fast, not graceful, but with a terrible inevitability. Its forward batteries flared to life, a cascade of crimson light that painted the void in hues of death. The first shot didn't hit the Eternal Claw. It didn't need to. It struck the Dominion's supply frigate, a vessel half a light second away, and turned it into a cloud of molten debris. The shockwave rattled Kyle Tor's flagship, and the bridge erupted in chaos. "Return fire!" he roared, but even as the order left his mouth, he knew it was futile. The Retribution didn't flinch. It didn't slow. It advanced, relentless, a storm of steel and fury bearing down on them all. And in that moment, Kyle Tor understood. The galaxy had underestimated the humans. They hadn't just survived. They'd endured. They'd forged their pain into a weapon, their grief into a blade. The Retribution wasn't here to negotiate or conquer. It was here to punish. The galaxy stood frozen in fear, and the humans were just getting started. The Eternal Claw shuddered as another volley from the Retribution tore through the Dominion's outer perimeter. Kyle Tor gripped the edge of his command throne, his claws digging into the polished obsidian. The holoscreen flickered with static, struggling to keep up with the carnage unfolding beyond the viewport. One moment, the frigate Iron Fang was there, its shields flaring defiantly. The next, it was gone, vaporized in a bloom of plasma so bright it seared the shadows from the bridge. "Status!" Kyle Tor bellowed, his voice nearly lost in the cacophony of alarms. "Shields at 60%, the tactical officer rasped, her mandibles trembling. "The fleet's down to 7 ships. Their weapons. They're cutting through us like we're nothing." Kyle Tor's mind raced, grasping for a strategy, a shred of hope. The Dominion had faced overwhelming odds before. They'd crushed the Zithar swarms through sheer numbers, outlasted the Vaxuan through cunning. But this was no battle. It was an execution. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to erase. "Focus fire on their forward section," he ordered, forcing his voice steady. "If we can breach their hull—" "Sir, we've tried," the weapons officer interrupted, his tone bordering on insubordination. "Our plasma lances barely scratch it. Their armor, it's regenerating. I don't know how, but it's healing faster than we can damage it." Kyle Tor's eyes widened, a chill sinking into his bones. Regenerating armor? That was impossible. The Dominion's finest metallurgists couldn't dream of such technology. Yet there it was, the Retribution shrugging off their best efforts like a beast shaking water from its hide. He opened his mouth to bark another command, but the comms crackled again, cutting him off. Admiral Elena Voss's voice filled the bridge once more, cold and unyielding, a blade wrapped in velvet. "You thought us weak because we bled. You thought us finished because we fell silent. But silence isn't surrender. It's the calm before the storm." The transmission cut out, replaced by a low, rhythmic hum that pulsed through the Eternal Claw's hull. Kyle Tor's officers exchanged frantic glances, their claws twitching. Then the hum grew louder, deeper, until it rattled the deck beneath their feet. The holoscreen zoomed in on the Retribution's midsection, where hatches were sliding open, hundreds of them, thousands, spilling forth a swarm of smaller craft like locusts from a hive. "Fighters," the sensor officer whispered, her voice breaking. "They're launching fighters." Kyle Tor stared, his mandibles slack. The human ships were tiny compared to the Retribution, but they moved with a ferocity that defied their size. They darted through the void, weaving between Dominion vessels, their weapons spitting streams of kinetic rounds and plasma bolts. One of the Eternal Claw's escorts, the Shadow Talon, tried to intercept them. It lasted less than a minute. The fighters swarmed it, tearing through its shields, punching holes in its hull until it erupted in a silent fireball. "Deploy our drones!" Kyle Tor roared, slamming a claw against his throne. "Meet them head on!" The Dominion drones launched, a cloud of sleek, beetle-like machines designed to overwhelm through numbers. But the human fighters didn't falter. They danced through the chaos, outmaneuvering the drones with a precision that bordered on unnatural. Kael'Tor watched, helpless as his forces dwindled. The Retribution loomed closer, its shadow swallowing the stars, its main guns charging for another devastating strike. On the Retribution's bridge, Elena Voss stood motionless, her hands clasped behind her back. The command deck was a stark contrast to the Dominion's opulent chaos. Sparse, utilitarian, every surface etched with the scars of a people who'd clawed their way back from oblivion. Her crew moved with quiet efficiency, their faces hard, their eyes burning with a shared purpose. She didn't need to shout orders. They knew what this was. They'd lived it. "Target their flagship," she said, her voice low but carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Let them feel what we felt." Her first officer, a grizzled man named Reyes, nodded. His left arm was a prosthetic, a reminder of the colony he'd lost to the Dominion's fire. "Main cannon's ready, ma'am. One shot'll crack it wide open." Elena's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Good. Fire when ready." Back on the Eternal Claw, Kael'Tor felt the shift before he saw it. The air grew heavy, the lights dimming as if the ship itself sensed its doom. The holoscreen flared red, a warning blaring. Incoming energy surge. He didn't have time to react. The Retribution's cannon unleashed its fury, a beam of light so intense it burned through the void, slamming into the Eternal Claw's shields. The barriers held for a heartbeat, then shattered like glass. The bridge exploded into chaos. Consoles sparked, officers screamed, and the deck buckled as the beam carved through the ship's core. Kael'Tor was thrown from his throne, his body slamming into the wall. Pain seared through him, but he forced himself to his feet, blood dripping from a gash above his eye. Through the fractured viewport, he saw it. The Retribution, implacable, unstoppable, a monument to humanity's rage. And then the second shot came. The second shot didn't just hit the Eternal Claw, it gutted it. The beam tore through the flagship's midsection, splitting armor and superstructure like a knife through flesh. Atmosphere vented into the void, dragging debris and bodies with it. Kael'Tor clung to a jagged railing, his claws scraping against the metal as the ship groaned around him. The bridge was a graveyard of flickering lights and broken consoles, the air thick with smoke and the coppery tang of blood. His officers were scattered, some dead, some dying, their mandibles twitching in silent agony. "Report!" he rasped, his voice hoarse over the wail of emergency klaxons. No one answered. The comms officer lay slumped over her station, a shard of metal jutting from her chest. The tactical officer was gone, sucked out through a breach in the hull. Kael'Tor stumbled to the nearest console, his vision swimming, and punched in a command. The holoscreen flickered to life, patchy and distorted, but it showed enough. The Eternal Claw was crippled, its engines offline, its weapons silent. Beyond it, the Dominion fleet was in tatters, half the ships reduced to drifting husks, the rest fleeing in disarray. And there, at the center of it all, was the Retribution. It hung in the void like a dark omen, its fighters swarming the survivors, picking them off with ruthless precision. Kael'Tor's mandibles clicked weakly, a sound of disbelief. This wasn't war, this was annihilation. "Reroute power to the distress beacon," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We need reinforcements. The High Council must know." A shadow fell over the console, and he turned to see his second-in-command, Vrakesh, staggering toward him. Her left arm hung useless, dripping ichor, but her eyes burned with defiance. "The beacon's gone, Admiral. They hit it first. We're alone." Kael'Tor's gut twisted. Alone. The word echoed in his skull, heavy and final. The Dominion had never been alone, not in 1,000 cycles. Their fleet spanned systems, their allies feared and respected them. But now, facing this human juggernaut, he felt the weight of isolation for the first time. The galaxy wasn't coming to save them. The galaxy was watching, holding its breath. Aboard the Retribution, Elena Voss stared at the tactical display, her face a mask of cold resolve. The Dominion flagship was a wreck, its hull bleeding fire and gas, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. She could still see the footage in her mind. Earth's colonies burning, the skies choked with ash, the screams of millions silenced by alien indifference. The Dominion hadn't cared then. They'd taken what they wanted and left the rest to rot. Now it was their turn to feel helpless. "Status on their fleet?" she asked, her voice steady. Reyes glanced at his console, his prosthetic hand tapping a rhythm of barely contained fury. "Scattered. A few are trying to jump to hyperspace, but our fighters are cutting them off. They won't make it." "Good," Elena said, her eyes narrowing. "Target the stragglers. No survivors." Reyes hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "Ma'am, some of those ships are signaling surrender. We could—" "No," she cut him off, her tone sharp enough to draw blood. "They don't get mercy. Not after what they did. Not after Mars." Reyes nodded, swallowing hard. Mars. The name hung between them like a ghost, a wound that hadn't healed. The Dominion had turned the red planet into a graveyard, a warning to humanity to stay down. But humans didn't stay down. They clawed their way back, fueled by rage and loss, and the Retribution was the result. A ship built from the bones of their dead worlds, armed with the fury of a species that refused to forget. The bridge crew didn't question her. They'd all lost something. Families, homes, hope. This wasn't just a mission. It was a reckoning. Far beyond the battlefield, in the glittering spires of the Telleri Collective's capital, panic was spreading. The Psionic Council sat in their crystalline chamber, their minds linked, their thoughts a storm of fear. They'd felt the Retribution's arrival, a psychic shockwave that rippled across the galaxy. Now, as reports trickled in, visuals of the Dominion fleet burning, whispers of a human warship that defied reason, they understood the truth. "They're not stopping," one of the counselors murmured, her voice trembling through the link. "They'll come for us next." "They're animals," another snapped, his mind flashing with disdain. "Primitives with a toy they don't understand." "No," a third voice cut in, older, wiser, heavy with dread. "They understand it perfectly. That's why we should be afraid." The council fell silent, their collective gaze turning toward the stars. The Dominion had been the galaxy's fist, its enforcer. If it fell, what chance did the rest of them have? Back in the void, the Eternal Claw's lights flickered one last time before going dark. Kyle Tor slumped against the console, his strength fading. Through the cracked viewport, he saw the Retribution's fighters closing in, their weapons glowing like the eyes of vengeful gods. He'd underestimated the humans, dismissed them as weak. Now, as the end loomed, he realized his mistake. They weren't weak. They were patient. The final shot came, and the Eternal Claw vanished in a burst of light, taking Kael'tor and his pride with it. The Eternal Claw was gone, its debris scattering across the void like ashes on the wind. The Dominion fleet, or what was left of it, fled in ragged desperation, their hyperspace drives sputtering as the Retribution's fighters hunted them down. One by one, the ships winked out, not into the safety of faster-than-light travel, but into oblivion. The humans didn't pause, didn't relent. Their warship pressed forward, a dark colossus carving a path through the wreckage, its silhouette a promise of ruin. On the Retribution's bridge, Elena Voss watched the carnage unfold, her hands clasped tight behind her back. The tactical display painted a grim picture. Red icons for Dominion ships blinking out, green dots for her fighters swarming like vengeful spirits. Her crew worked in silence, their movements precise, their faces etched with the kind of determination that came from years of buried pain. She didn't need to speak. They all knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about the Dominion. This was about sending a message, one the galaxy wouldn't forget. "Admiral," Reyes said, breaking the quiet. His voice was rough, strained. "Scans show a Dominion outpost 3 light seconds out. Minimal defenses, mostly supply drones and a skeleton crew. Looks like they're trying to evacuate." Elena's eyes flicked to the display, a cold glint in them. "They don't get to run, not this time. Divert a fighter wing. Take it out." Reyes nodded, relaying the order. A dozen green dots peeled off from the main swarm, streaking towards the outpost. Within minutes, the feed showed the result. Explosions blooming across the structure, drones spiraling into the void, the faint flicker of escape pods snuffed out by precise strikes. Elena didn't flinch. She'd seen worse. She'd lived worse. "Ma'am," another officer piped up, a young woman with a scar running down her cheek. "We're picking up chatter from the Telleri. They're broadcasting on open channels, warning their systems about us. They're calling us the Scourge of Sol." A murmur rippled through the bridge, a mix of grim pride and bitter amusement. Elena's lips twitched, the closest she'd come to a smile since this began. "Let them talk," she said. "Let them name us. Fear's a better weapon than any cannon." The officer hesitated, then added, "They're also mobilizing their fleet. Long-range sensors show ships massing near their core worlds." "Good," Elena replied, her voice like steel. "Let them come. We'll be ready." Beyond the Retribution's reach, the galaxy was waking up to the nightmare. In the Vaxuan lattice, crystalline minds hummed with alarm, their harmonic songs fracturing into dissonance. They'd dismissed the humans as fleeting, insignificant, a species too chaotic to endure. Now, their lattice networks pulsed with images of the Retribution, its scarred hull a testament to endurance they couldn't comprehend. The Vaxuan didn't fear easily, but this was different. This was a force that didn't bend, didn't break. It shattered. In the Telleri Collective, the Psionic Council's chamber was a storm of light and sound. Their minds clashed, arguments erupting as they grappled with the impossible. The Dominion was crumbling. Reports confirmed it. Entire battle groups wiped out, outposts reduced to slag, and still the humans advanced. The eldest counselor, Tevara, floated at the center of the chaos, her crystalline form dim with exhaustion. "We must act," a younger counselor insisted, his thoughts sharp with panic. "If we strike now, we can stop them before they reach our borders." "And lose everything," Tevara countered, her voice a low hum through the link. "You've seen their ship, their resolve. This isn't a foe we can outthink. They don't fight for power or glory, they fight for spite." "Then what do we do?" another demanded, his mind flashing with images of burning worlds. Tevara's light pulsed faintly. "We pray they stop at the Dominion, and if they don't, we beg." Back in the void, the Retribution slowed, its engines rumbling as it surveyed the battlefield. The Dominion's resistance was broken, their ships either dust or fleeing into the dark. Elena turned from the display, her gaze settling on a small holo frame on her console. A faded image of a family, smiling under a red Martian sky. Her family. Gone now, like so many others. She touched it briefly, her fingers trembling, then straightened. "Set course for the Dominion's inner systems," she said, her voice steady once more. "We're not done." Reyes looked at her, a flicker of something, concern, maybe, crossing his face. "Ma'am, the crew's been at it for hours. We could stand to—" "No rest," she cut in, her eyes locking with his. Not until they understand. Not until they feel it. He nodded, swallowing his protest. The order went out, and the Retribution surged forward, its fighters falling into formation like a flock of carrion birds. The galaxy watched, breathless, as humanity's wrath bore down on the Dominion's heart. And in the distance, the Telleri fleet stirred, knowing they might be next. The Retribution carved through the void, its engines a low growl that echoed in the bones of its crew. The Dominion's inner systems loomed ahead, a cluster of fortified worlds, their skies bristling with orbital defenses and their surfaces scarred by centuries of conquest. Elena Voss stood at the bridge's heart, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. Red icons swarmed like angry wasps, marking the enemy's last stand. She didn't blink. This was where it ended. "Admiral," Reyes said, his voice taut. "They've got 3 dreadnoughts in orbit around their capital, plus a grid of plasma turrets. It's a kill zone." "Let them try," Elena replied, her tone ice-cold. "Charge the main cannon. Target their flagship." The crew snapped to action, hands flying over consoles. The Retribution's core hummed, power surging through its veins as the cannon primed. Outside, the Dominion dreadnoughts turned, their sleek, claw-like hulls glinting in the starlight. They fired first, a barrage of plasma that slammed into the Retribution's shields, lighting them up in a cascade of blue. The ship rocked, but held. "Shields at 80%, the scar-faced officer reported. "They're throwing everything at us." Elena nodded, unfazed. "Return fire." The cannon roared, a beam of molten fury that punched through the lead dreadnought's defenses. The ship split apart, its halves drifting in a cloud of sparks and silence. The other 2 faltered, their formations breaking as the Retribution's fighters swarmed in, tearing at their flanks. On the planet below, the Dominion's leaders watched, their mandibles trembling. They'd never seen defeat, not like this. Aboard one of the surviving dreadnoughts, Commander Zeth-Kar clung to his command post, his 4 eyes wide with terror. The humans weren't slowing. Their ship absorbed punishment that should have crippled it, their fighters struck with a precision that defied logic. He'd heard the stories, Earth's colonies burning, their pleas ignored. He'd laughed then, called it a cull of the weak. Now he understood. They weren't weak, they were relentless. "Signal surrender!" Zeth-Kar barked, his voice cracking. "Tell them we yield." His comms officer hesitated. "Sir, they're not answering. They're—" The words died as the Retribution's cannon fired again. The second dreadnought vanished in a flash of light, and Zeth-Kar's ship shuddered under a hail of fighter strikes. He fell to his knees, the deck splitting beneath him. This wasn't war. This was judgment. On the Retribution, Elena watched the 3rd dreadnought burn, her chest tight with something she couldn't name. Satisfaction, maybe, or the ghost of grief. The planet's defenses flickered, overwhelmed. She turned to Reyes. "Prepare the landing teams. We finish this on the ground." He nodded, but his eyes held a question he didn't voice. How far would she go? How much was enough? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. The Retribution descended, a shadow over the Dominion's capital, and the galaxy held its breath. The Retribution hung low over the Dominion's capital world, its shadow swallowing the spires of Kavren Prime. The planet's surface was a jagged tapestry of steel and stone, its cities built from the bones of conquered worlds, its skies once thick with the arrogance of unchallenged rule. Now, those skies burned. The orbital defenses were gone, reduced to smoldering wrecks by the Retribution's relentless barrage. The last dreadnought had crashed into the eastern wastes, a twisted monument to the Dominion's fall. And still, the humans weren't done. Elena Voss stood at the edge of the deployment bay, her boots ringing against the metal deck as drop ships roared to life behind her. The air was thick with the tang of fuel and the low hum of anticipation. Soldiers moved in disciplined silence, their armor scarred and patched, their rifles gleaming with cold purpose. These weren't the polished troops of a galactic empire. They were survivors, forged in the ashes of Earth's lost colonies, their faces hard with the weight of memory. "Landing team's ready, ma'am," Reyes said, stepping up beside her. His prosthetic arm whirred faintly as he adjusted his helmet. "We've got 3 targets, their command citadel, the industrial core, and their civilian evacuation zone." Elena's jaw tightened. "No civilians," she said, her voice low but firm. "They don't get to hide behind their innocence. Focus on the citadel and the core. Burn their power to the ground." Reyes nodded, though his eyes flickered with something unspoken. He'd followed her this far, through the void, through the fire, but the line between justice and slaughter was blurring, and he felt it. They all did. Still, no one argued. The dropships launched, engines flaring as they descended through the smoke-choked atmosphere, carrying humanity's wrath to the surface. Below the Dominion's capital was a hive of chaos. The streets teemed with Kavren soldiers and civilians alike, their mandibles clicking in frantic terror. The High Council had barricaded themselves in the citadel, a towering fortress of black stone and shimmering shields. They'd sent pleas across the galaxy, begging the Telleri, the Vaxuan, anyone to intervene. No one answered. The galaxy watched, silent and afraid, as the humans closed in. Commander Zethkar had survived his ship's destruction, dragged from the wreckage by a loyal squad. Now he stood atop the citadel's ramparts, his armor cracked, his breath ragged. The horizon glowed with the fires of fallen outposts, and above, the retribution loomed like a god of death. He'd mocked the humans once, called them vermin. Now he saw the truth. They were a force of nature, unstoppable, unbreakable. "They're landing," a subordinate rasped, pointing to the dropships breaking through the clouds. "We can't hold them." "We will," Zethkar snarled, clutching his plasma lance. "This is our world, our legacy. We fight to the last." The first dropship touched down, its ramp slamming open. Human soldiers poured out, their movements swift and brutal. Plasma fire met them, cutting down a few, but they pressed on, relentless. Grenades flashed, tearing through Dominion lines, and the air filled with the screams of the dying. Zethkar charged, his lance blazing, but a human met him. Reyes, his prosthetic arm slamming into Zethkar's chest with bone-crushing force. The commander fell, gasping, as Reyes loomed over him. "This is for Mars," Reyes growled, and drove his blade through Zethkar's heart. Above, Elena watched the feed from the Retribution's bridge, her expression unreadable. The Citadel's shields flickered under artillery fire, the industrial core erupting in plumes of flame. Her soldiers were a tide, washing over the Dominion's defenses, leaving nothing but ruin. She should have felt triumph, but all she felt was the hollow ache of a debt still unpaid. "Admiral," the scar-faced officer said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The Telleri fleet's on the move. They're coming for us." Elena turned, her eyes narrowing. "Let them. We'll be waiting." The ground shook as the citadel began to crumble, and in the distance, the Telleri ships blinked into hyperspace, racing toward their reckoning. The citadel of Kavren Prime fell in a roar of dust and fire, its black stone walls collapsing under the Retribution's orbital strikes. On the ground, human soldiers moved through the wreckage, their boots crunching over shattered Dominion banners. Reyes stood amidst the chaos, his blade dripping with ichor, the body of Zethkar cooling at his feet. The air was thick with smoke and the wails of the defeated, but he felt no victory, only the weight of a promise kept, and a war still unfinished. Above, Elena Voss paced the Retribution's bridge, her eyes on the tactical display. The Dominion's capital was a smoldering ruin, its power broken, its people scattered. But the scar-faced officer's warning echoed in her mind. The Tellurai were coming. Their fleet, sleek, shimmering cutters powered by psionic energy, had jumped into hyperspace, their course set for Kavren Prime. They weren't here to save the Dominion. They were here to stop the humans before the Retribution turned its gaze on them. "Time to intercept?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. 2 hours, the officer replied, her scarred cheek twitching. "They're fast, ma'am. Faster than anything we've faced." "Then we hit them harder," Elena said, turning to Reyes as he stepped onto the bridge, his armor streaked with ash. "Ground ops are done?" "Done," he confirmed, his voice rough. "The Dominion's finished here. What's next?" Elena pointed to the display, where green dots marked the Retribution and red ones pulsed for the approaching Tellurai. "They think they can stop us. We prove them wrong." Reyes nodded, but his eyes held a flicker of doubt. "We're stretched thin, Elena. The crew's exhausted. We've been fighting non-stop since—" "No rest," she cut him off, her tone sharp. "Not until they all pay." He didn't argue, but the silence between them spoke volumes. The crew felt it too. The edge they were teetering on, the line between justice and obsession. Still, they obeyed. The Retribution's engines flared, repositioning to face the incoming threat, its fighters recalled to rearm and refuel. Far off, in the Tellurai fleet's lead ship, Counselor Tevara floated in her command sphere, her crystalline form pulsing with resolve. The humans were a plague, a wildfire that had to be contained. She'd seen the feeds. Kavren Prime burning, the Dominion's might reduced to ash. The galaxy couldn't survive this storm unchecked. "Engage as soon as we exit hyperspace," she ordered, her thoughts rippling through the fleet's psionic link. "Target their ship. End this." The Tellurai ships emerged in a flash of light, their cutters gleaming like shards of glass against the void. The Retribution waited, its cannon charging, its crew braced. Elena clenched her fists, the hollow frame of her lost family glinting in the corner of her eye. "Fire," she whispered, and the galaxy braced for the clash. The void erupted as the Tellurai fleet met the Retribution. Their cutters streaked forward, beams of psionic energy lashing out, slicing through space with surgical precision. The Retribution's shields flared under the assault, blue arcs crackling across its scarred hull. Elena Voss stood rigid on the bridge, her eyes locked on the tactical display as red and green icons danced in a deadly ballet. The Tellurai were fast, their attacks coordinated through their psychic link, but the humans had something they didn't. Raw, unyielding fury. "Main cannon now!" Elena barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. The Retribution shuddered as its cannon unleashed a torrent of light, slamming into the lead Tellurai cutter. The ship shattered, its crystalline hull fracturing into a million glittering shards. The fleet faltered, their psionic harmony disrupted by the loss, and the Retribution's fighters seized the moment, swarming the gaps with relentless strikes. Explosions bloomed silently in the dark, each one a testament to humanity's refusal to yield. Aboard her command sphere, Tevara recoiled, her light dimming as the psychic backlash hit. She felt every death, every ship lost, a scream in her mind. The humans weren't just fighting, they were tearing through her fleet like a beast unleashed. "Focus fire," she commanded, her thoughts sharp with desperation. "Destroy their ship." The Tellurai rallied, their beams converging on the Retribution. The shields buckled, dropping to 30%, and the bridge rocked, consoles sparking. Reyes grabbed the railing, his prosthetic arm straining. "We can't take much more, Elena." "We don't have to," she shot back, her voice fierce. "Target their core ship. End this." The cannon charged again, slower this time, the ship's systems straining. The Telleri pressed their advantage, their cutters circling like predators. But the humans didn't break. The Retribution fired, the beam piercing Tevara's sphere. Her scream echoed through the psionic link as her ship exploded, silencing the fleet's unity. The remaining cutters scattered, leaderless, and the Retribution hunted them down, one by one. When the last Telleri ship burned out, silence fell. The bridge was dim, the crew battered but alive. Elena sank into her chair, her hands trembling as she touched the hollow frame of her family. The Dominion was broken, the Telleri humbled. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do, what it would do, when pushed too far. "Ma'am," the scar-faced officer said softly, "no more signals." They're afraid." Elena nodded, her chest tight. "Good. Let them be." Reyes approached, his voice low. "Is it enough?" She looked at him, then at the stars beyond the viewport, stars that had once burned her worlds. "For now," she whispered.